Hey, how's it going? On this episode of Home Water Dispatch, I'm continuing to work my way downstream on some of my home waters, a place called the Mill River. And I've come across an impoundment, a place called Puffer's Pond. And I'm using this as an opportunity to talk about some additional interesting properties of water. So Puffer's Pond is an impoundment. There's a dam over there. We'll talk about that in another episode. But this is a little lake, right? It's popular for swimming, and there's different species of fish in here. But it's no longer a flowing part of the Mill River. It's a pond. And I use it as an opportunity to think about the interesting connection between water temperature and density. And so water's kind of a neat substance on our planet, right? In natural conditions, it is a liquid, it is a vapor in the clouds, and it's also frozen in some places, right? And that gives us some indications about this relationship with density. But the cool thing though, something we need to keep in mind, is water is most dense at 4 degrees Celsius, which is around 39.2 degrees Fahrenheit. That's significant. So in a pond like this, it's summer, it's 90 degrees, right? It's brutally hot. And what happens in temperate lakes is we get stratification. You can think of stratification, strata layers, right? And so we've got warm water on the top, and if we know that water is most dense at 4 degrees, right? As water gets cooler, it's going to be more dense. It's going to be below this warmer water that's on the surface. If you've ever experienced it, you're at your local pond or lake in the summertime and you're swimming in the surface and it's great, and then you dive down and all of a sudden, woo, you get cold, where you're going through rapid changes in water temperature and something called the thermocline. We won't get into the layers right now. But what's important to remember is that water's increases in density as it approaches 4 degrees Celsius, or that 39.2 degrees Fahrenheit. And so in previous episodes, we talked about how water, when it's cold, has this capacity to hold more dissolved oxygen. That is true unless there are other things at play. So if we go down into the lower depths of this pond where the water's colder, there's also some other cool stuff happening where, because this is an impoundment, we get sediment and leaves and dead squirrels or whatever dying at the bottom of the lake, and it decomposes. And decomposition basically removes oxygen from the water. So even though you might have colder water at a bottom of a temperate lake or a pond like this, you can't think about it having more oxygen, right? It actually has less because of decomposition that's going on. There's also, at the surface, we do get natural diffusion of oxygen into the water. Sometimes if there's waves or stuff, or even thinking about in streams, when you've got bubbling streams, that helps get a little bit more oxygen into the water. But there are other factors at play, right? We've got water temperature is important, the relationship between water temperature and density, and then you've got decomposition that can remove some of that dissolved oxygen, and that influences where certain fish can live, where they can reside. If they're not oxygen tolerant to low oxygen, that sometimes compresses where they might be able to live. It influences their interactions with the habitat, might influence their interactions with other fish. As anglers, it's important to understand that connection between water temperature, density, dissolved oxygen, and movement patterns of fish. It's something we can all even think about when we go back to the stream and we have pools at lower, you've got riffles and then you have pools and streams. And in those pools where the water slows down, you actually do get sort of, if you hike through one of those pools, it can get mucky and there can be organic matter that's in there decomposing. And if flow rates go down, then you've got decomposition, lower flow rates. You might have localized areas where dissolved oxygen goes down. And, that is important when we're dealing with species upstream, like trout. Here we've got largemouth bass, we've got white suckers, we've got sunfish of a couple different kinds, pumpkin seed and bluegill. They might be a little bit more tolerant to lower dissolved oxygen levels. They might be a little bit more tolerant to higher temperatures. But this is also a place that gets stocked with rainbow trout, because it's a nice little pond. People like to come fishing here. And, you know, those stocked fish, it's a kind of a put and take fishery. It's an expectation to not, maybe some people do catch and release, but I know a lot of people that come here and they harvest trout, and it's a nice leisure activity for them. We won't get into right now issues related to stocking. That's for other episodes, but I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about that relationship between water temperature and density, and then you loop in dissolved oxygen in there. And there are just more things that we need to consider when we want to be informed advocates and activists when we come to the fish that we love. Now there's one other little segment, and I was gonna do this as a separate episode, but I'm on a roll, that this impoundment here, it might be hard to see, but there's some people over there on the shore, and then there's a few people dabbling in the water, but this pond right now is closed to swimming because the water level is low, the water temperature is high, and there are lots of houses, there are some farms upstream, and it's closed because of E. coli levels are elevated and they're not safe to be in as a person. And so, you know, this brings the question, you know, again, this is a valuable piece of historical property. There's lots of people that, you know, when it isn't closed, there's kids that come swimming here, there are people that swim and paddle and fish. But over sort of historical time, the landscape has changed, right? The water temperatures are going up, flow rates are going down. There might be more activity in the watershed that is contributing nutrients that is impacting, or there might be septic systems or leaky sewers, who knows, dogs pooping everywhere, that are impacting the bacteria levels in this pond. So it's at a really interesting intersection of thinking about the role of these types of ponds and the fact that it's an impoundment, right? We'll talk about that in another episode. I think I'm going to make my way further downstream, but there's a big dam down there, and it's to some people it's really beautiful, but it also represents some issues. So I'm going to park that there for this episode of Home Water Dispatch, and yeah, stay tuned for others. I'm going to have some water because I'm like sweating like crazy, and we'll keep working downstream. See you in a little bit. Bye. They didn't stop.